question, does history repeat itself? First of all, I'm going to cite the example of the Russian and the French Revolution. They're both very similar because they started because of the bad leadership of the countries and because of the bad economy. And in both cases, people deposed the authoritarian governments in search for a better life, and they changed the system into something they really believed in. Then we can see that the industrialization of countries were very similar. Also, colonization processes, independence processes, and dictatorships are all very similar. We can also see that one major factor for social revolutions is hunger. When people are hungry, they tend to be more unsatisfied, and they tend to make bigger efforts to change things. Another thing we can see that in history didn't work is the Soviet socialism that was implanted in both USSR and in China by Mao Zedong, and they didn't work, and they made a lot of people starve, and the countries went into a big crisis because of this system. So now we're going to talk about differences in World War I and II. Obviously they were different because they happened in different years, and World War I lasted for 4 years and World War II for 6. And we can see that, for example, nationalism was a big part in both wars, but in World War I it led the Balkans to demand for independence, and it caused more conflict than it united. In World War II, what happened is that nationalism made fascist movements rise, and they made Germany stronger. So in the First World War, the nationalist processes made countries divide, and in World War II, it made countries unify themselves. In World War I, the murder of Franz Ferdinand was the spark of the war, and in World War II, there were no murders, but there were the actions of the Treaty of Versailles that were pushing the conflict. Another major difference in both wars was that in the first one, Russia dropped out in 1980 because they were having a Russian Revolution, and they had this big civil war going on inside their countries, and they decided that it wasn't best for them to be in the World War. In the second one, Russia joins the war after Hitler breaks the non-aggression pact. Another difference was that in World War I, they fought in trenches. In the Second World War, they dropped nuclear bombs, which was a big difference both in technology and in the aggressiveness of the war. They also had the Holocaust and island hopping, which was in the Pacific part of the war. And they also used Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg was a tactic that was used by the Germans, which was a very quick and intensive attack. Another major difference between World War I and II was that in the second one there were much more civil casualties because the war was fought in the cities, and in World War II it was fought in the trenches. World War II saw 6.5 times the number of people that died in World War I because they had more aggressiveness, such as the Holocaust and the atomic bombs. In World War I, Germany was blamed and punished as a whole country, and that caused them to be very angry. They were very harsh, and they felt very hard done by. The Treaty of Versailles was signed in World War I to blame Germany for the war and to give big reparations for the other countries which also suffered in the war.
Now we're going to talk about the similarities between both wars. First, both wars favored the United States of America. European power declined while the American grew. Germany was defeated on both wars. League of Nations and the UN failed to avoid conflicts. The United States started as neutral. The European countries were on an economical crisis. They were considered to be total wars because the countries totally participated during the conflict. Countries followed a period of tension. Technology improved a lot. They both changed Europe's map. Millions of lives were lost. People became homeless and immigrated to another countries to be safe.
So, after analyzing World War I and II, we see that there are a lot of similarities between them. Of course, there are some differences, but we see that the great majority are similarities. That there are other things in history that do repeat themselves, like we said in the beginning of the video. So, the patterns in our society and in our history do repeat themselves. One thing that we learn from history is that we haven't learned history's lessons.